actually turns into practice, and how the researchers on this call turn the research that they're doing into practice as well. We've seen a lot of momentum and movement in the last couple of months and years, especially since 2020, for social innovation, social entrepreneurship, and definitely towards corporate pledges to be a force for good and certainly a force for the planet. And we see social entrepreneurship and social innovation as one of the key tools on how to get it done, because now it's time not just to pledge, but to actually put in practice what everybody is preaching. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is an open Zoom call. It's not a webinar. There's a reason for that. We really love seeing you all on the videos here. We also love the interaction with you. And a little spoiler alert here, you're also going to get to network with your colleagues from around the world. We're going to have a networking breakout session later in this conversation, and that will give you the chance to meet interesting people, since we're not getting a chance these days to do that, at least do it virtually. And I just heard a screenshot. I would definitely encourage you to do that. It's great to have such a crowd here, and just take the screenshot of all the videos and the cameras on here. You can at any time put any questions to the panelists in the chat box. Feel free to use that at your leisure. For now, as I mentioned in the beginning, keep your mics on mute, please. You can then unmute once you go into the breakout rooms. And keep your cameras on, but please keep your mics on mute. With that, I want to say, first of all, thank you to the panelists, and specifically Katell from INSEAD here, for putting together this really, really interesting conversation that we're going to be having today. We are very much looking forward to it. We're looking forward to learn a lot. And we're also looking forward to all these great next steps that we're going to be seeing in the future. So thanks a lot. I also want to shout out to our other partners, Porticus, who made our research possible, and to the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs, who helped us publish the first reports that I'm going to be presenting in a second here at the World Economic Forum in 2020, and also in a very distinct way are helping us to put theory into practice in our own very ways. Also, a big welcome to Jasjit Singh and Jessie Coates, who are going to be speaking on the panel later on, and they'll be introduced then. Well, going to give you a bit of an overview of research trends and the outcomes of some of the work we've been seeing. We're going to then jump into the panel, and as I mentioned, we're then going to be networking to close with a Q&A that is based on the networking exercises. Don't be scared. Your networking usually doesn't hurt, but you can also decide to listen in silently into networking breaks, but we highly encourage you to actually have a chat with each other. We as Yunus Social Business, we obviously build our idea on our co-founder, Professor Muhammad Yunus, who has pioneered the concept of microfinance, and then also the concept of social business as a way to solve some of the pressing problems in our world. And I mentioned initially the trend towards corporate pledges, towards more sustainability, towards obviously acting within the planetary boundaries, but at the same time also making sure that we're living in a just and inclusive economy. Now, in order to get to that world, which is not the current reality, it's a future vision. In order to get to that world, we think we need to build new roads, and for that we need unusual pioneers. Unusual pioneers or social entrepreneurs. Our work with INSEAD has been focusing on that idea of these unusual pioneers, of these social entrepreneurs. So really looking at what are individuals within companies, individuals within organizations doing towards transforming their own organizations towards a net positive contributor towards society. There are many exciting, inspiring examples out there. We were actually surprised to find over 200 initiatives, and even more surprised that more than 50 social entrepreneurs were more than welcome, more than open to actually share their experiences. So in this first research together with INSEAD, with HEC, with the Schwab Foundation, we brought together the insights from these 50 companies and these 50 social entrepreneurs. As an example, Jayant from Essilor was on for just another call that we had in the same framework. and he was setting up the iMitra initiative that allows people around the world and the more than 2 billion people that don't have access to eye care get access to it through a network of micro-entrepreneurs. It's currently reaching millions of people with over 60,000 micro-entrepreneurs that are creating a living from access to services for eye care. There's many more examples out there that are leveraging their company's expertise and resources to solve social or environmental problems. But they themselves also face key challenges. We've seen a number of these challenges in our research. You know, the corporate immune system is revolting against innovation in itself, but even more so when it comes to social innovation. There's still a lot of short-term thinking in our world that makes long-term social innovation tricky. We need to tell good stories about the long-term effects of social innovation so that the stakeholders within the organizations are actually on board. So a lot of challenges have developed. And that is why we've also taken it upon our task to set up a program that supports social entrepreneurs and that really accelerates their initiatives and their impact that they're creating. So that's our way of putting research into practice. We've taken the research, we developed an accelerator program for social entrepreneurs. And the next couple of weeks, we're going to be announcing the first cohort that's going to be joining the 8-month program that's starting in August with the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Singapore and end with the annual meeting in January in Davos. It combines a group of over a dozen partners that are active in this space, actively working in this very nascent space still. And that's the super exciting part for us as well. And that's why we're so excited to have the panel on that we have here today, because that collaboration across sectors, across organizations is incredibly important to get us towards the goals that we want to achieve as a society and as a planet. There's just a few here listed of these amazing organizations. And I would say that COVID, as harsh and as terrible as it is as a crisis, has brought one silver lining for me in the last couple of months, which was really the amount of collaboration within the sector and the amount of willingness amongst people to work together towards achieving a truly sustainable society. Now, we want to understand from you, first of all, where are you on your journey to understanding corporate social entrepreneurship? So I'm going to ask Ruby, our moderator here, to start the polling, and you let us know what are the main, where you really are, what is your understanding of corporate social entrepreneurship?
If anyone who's a co-host is able to launch that poll, could they do that?
I think you should see it now. So now we have that little race going on here on my screen as you are voting. So do you know what a social entrepreneur is? Yes, you are one, and we have a couple of you that are actually social entrepreneurs. Welcome to the pack. I know you're still rare. We have 13% at the moment. Then others know what a social entrepreneur is. We have almost half of you so far. And then a third not really sure, well, what is this kind of concept? And 6% no idea so far. Keep voting. We have 86%, 87% now in. Well, while you're still voting, let me go into very concrete definitions. From a research perspective, obviously, we all love definitions. We all love to put things into a box. For the sake of our research and for the sake of our work, we define a social entrepreneur as an entrepreneurial employee. So you're employed, but you're acting in an entrepreneurial way, who develops a profitable new product, service, or business model that creates value for society and your company. And by the way, we include planet in that as well, as an ultimate impact on society as well. Social entrepreneurs then in turn help their employers meet sustainability commitments. We talked about these pledges in 2020, so how do you put this into practice? And then they create value for customers and communities in ways that are built to last. And the build to last is important as we focus on business models that are self-perpetuating, that are self-reinforcing, and therefore also scalable to create impact. But all of this is done within the realm of a company. That's what we define as a corporate social entrepreneur. And you see some examples on the right that give some examples of how that could actually take shape and form. And the closing result of the survey, as you've seen, was 50% know what a social entrepreneur is. 23 of you are those crazy pioneers, those unusual pioneers that are already venturing out there to create impact through your organization. And I hope that the 1/3 that wasn't sure or didn't know what a social entrepreneur is now has a bit of a better understanding. When we interviewed social entrepreneurs, we had a composition of mostly European organizations and a quarter of US-based social entrepreneurs. That was because the scope of the research was for Europe and the US. We're at the moment starting projects that are also looking at Asian-based companies and their view on social entrepreneurship. And you can see that the way that these businesses set up their social entrepreneurship initiatives varies quite distinctly. Almost half looked at setting this up as a project or department inside of their organization, while over 1/3 put it up as a separate business unit. And we can talk about that a little bit later on what's the benefit of either or. 18% created a standalone entity altogether. Now, what's the output? And the key findings of the survey and of the work last year was really on benefits. So the key benefit that everybody mentioned in unprompted interviews, this is not based on a quantitative surveys where we prompted answers, but they were unprompted interviews without prefacing it. And the key thing here was really on employee engagement, job satisfaction, and talent acquisition. It really created a new momentum within the organization because the company realized, wow, if I at Essilor could, for example, reach so many people around the world through my eye care products, what is the implications that I actually have on my core business? How can I rethink the way I'm doing business from a daily perspective? And so the next most important benefit was then also this mindset shift and the culture change inside of the company that really triggered corporate transformation in some of these cases. And we need nothing less than that in the future. If we really want to turn around the corporate sector into a problem solver, whereas at the moment, I think many of us still see it as a problem creator in many ways. But if we want to turn around the corporate sector, we need that kind of mindset shift and culture change, not just within the companies, but also amongst the stakeholders that are important to these companies. And obviously, half of it, they also saw business innovation, access to new customers, and also brand equity as a key benefit. Now, in the interest of time, let me skip this here, but you can actually look at the research on unusualbusiness.com/business-as-unusual. We'll share the link in the chat as well, just for you to have a look at. But I want to quickly hand over to Artie, who's leading the second edition of Business as Unusual of our research work, which is now looking at how do we reap the benefits of social entrepreneurship and truly make transformation work? How do we integrate social entrepreneurs into corporate value chains? And what can CEOs do to enforce that process? Artie, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. So great to know that there are, I think that 65% of the people in this room are either social entrepreneurs or know about social entrepreneurs or know about social entrepreneurship. So I'm just going to give you a very, very quick sneak preview of how we're building on last year's research to ask a few different questions this year. But that said, we'd love to hear from you if you have other ideas on areas that we can research that will help you do your work better and grow your impact. So let me just tell you about the 3 pieces of research, the 4 pieces of research that we're looking at coming out with this year, and watch out for it. We will launch this sometime in a staggered manner between August going up to October. Dan, if you could just pop up the questions on the slide, please. Thank you very much. So as Dan said, we're looking at building on the research last year. Again, looking at the barriers and enablers to corporate purpose transformation in large companies, but this time not from the perspective of the intrapreneur, but from a few other lenses. So the first lens is that of the CEO or C-level, and the key question that we're trying to understand is what can the C-level inside a large organization that is transforming do to enable that, that transformation process? And can social entrepreneurship be that trigger that leads to that broader transformation? The second question that we're looking at, which again is linked to the first question, is what can shareholders, what can the world of finance, and particularly shareholders do to enable purpose transformation in large companies? What do they do to make it easier? What do they do to make it more difficult? We've all been reading about the case of, those of you that are based in Europe, you've been reading about the case of Danone. And there are interesting cautionary lessons there, but we also hear that in many cases in many countries, ESG is in fact pushing companies to change, even if it doesn't always go deep enough. So that's another aspect that we're looking at. And these first two questions will find themselves in front of your screens in the form of one output, which is basically a purpose playbook that will help C-level inside companies navigate this transformation process more easily. The second piece of research that we're doing that is going to be a separate output is around social sourcing. As Dan said, a lot of companies are making commitments. One of those is to look at their supply chains, and many companies are setting very ambitious net zero targets. But on the S side as well, which is the social side of E, S, and G, a lot of companies are also starting to make commitments around increasing that S component by starting to work more with social enterprises as suppliers or different parts of their supply chain. And so we're looking at understanding that, demystifying that, and creating a how-to guide for companies that want to work with social entrepreneurs, to learn from other companies that are further on in that process, and essentially provide information on how a social enterprise can get corporate ready, but equally how a corporate can get social enterprise ready. And then the final piece of research that we're doing builds again on work that we did last year on what we heard from entrepreneurs last year, which is that they sold their projects internally to get necessary buy-in or to get budgets by talking about the impact of that initiative, not just on the communities that were set up to impact, but on key metrics, key business metrics inside the organization that sometimes act as predictors of future business success. But what we heard is that all of these key success factors were always told in the form of stories. And we've designed a series of quantitative experiments that are looking at putting hard data behind that business case. And so that's the fourth piece of work that you see coming out of our stable that is being contributed to by all of the partners that we had last year as well. And with that, I will now hand over to Katell for the panel.
Thanks, Arti. And we are at INSEAD delighted to be part of that research because we need to know more. We need to understand better how the world of entrepreneurship works. So we have here with us today two members of our community at INSEAD, Jessie, welcome, and Jasjit Singh, and they will bring different perspective on this research, where it's coming from and how it's applied. So first, Jessie, nice to have you today. You are in your official function, EY Global Impact Entrepreneur Leader. You're basically an intrapreneur within EY, and that is impactful, potentially, because the EY is one of the largest auditing firms in the world, with over 300,000 employees in 150 countries. So this is what intrapreneur can change and can impact. You are a chartered accountant by trainings, and you started with EY as a, if I may, as a classic accountant. So what happened? How did you move and to become an intrapreneur within EY?
Sure. Well, firstly, it's lovely to be with you all, and Katell, thank you for that very kind introduction. Yeah, I guess when I first joined EY, I actually joined our graduate scheme many years ago in the UK, primarily because I thought that becoming an accountant seemed like a sensible thing to do. I'd actually just done a veterinary medicine degree and realized that I'd be a terrible vet. So I was looking for something else to do, and realized that I was actually much more interested in business. I saw EY as an organization that had a very people-centric culture, and also, as you say, kind of so big that I felt there was potentially a lot of opportunity to work in a lot of different roles all around the world. And I spent, as you say, the kind of first part of my career at EY working in a variety of fascinating, purely commercial roles. First helping to turn around middle market businesses in the UK, and then moving on to advise multinational corporations and governments and non-profit organizations as well that were headquartered in the UK, also spent some time in South Africa to help them overcome their challenges. And I guess during that time, I was a senior manager in our consulting practice by then, and I was becoming increasingly passionate about the role of business as a force for good, and the concept of social entrepreneurship. And I have to admit, EY is an organization that, in my experience, does have very strong values, a very strong sense of purpose, but it is sometimes difficult in a very large organization to feel that on a day-to-day basis, particularly, I think, when you're consulting to organizations that perhaps don't share those values. And so I considered leaving EY and setting up an impact venture distinctly, or joining an impact fund. But in the end, I realized that, as you said, Katell, that I think from my personal impact perspective, I felt that actually, given the scale of EY as a global organization and the power and networks we have, that I could create far more positive impact by using my understanding of the organization and the connections I had to help us become a more impactful organization and extend our services to smaller, more socially impactful clients, to social entrepreneurs. And luckily enough, at that exact time, there was a relatively small consulting practice for social entrepreneurs, essentially a startup within EY, that had been actually founded a few years earlier by one of my brilliant colleagues in the UK, who's actually sadly since moved on from EY. And he had managed to secure a small ring-fenced budget for a very small team to work full-time to run and grow this social entrepreneurship practice within EY, this consulting practice within EY. So I joined that team in 2017, and actually at that point was also selected for Jasjit's INSEAD Social Entrepreneurship program in Singapore. And since then,
that's a perfect segue, because we come back to what happened then.
Absolutely.
That's a perfect segue for me to introduce Jasjit. And just first lesson though, you don't need to leave your firm to grow your impact, right? I think it's important. And we keep on telling that to students. If you stay where you are and try to change things from within, you can do a lot. So that's what you're trying to tell our students as well, right? Jasjit Singh, you are professor of strategy at INSEAD in our school. And in terms of impact here, just to give a sense, INSEAD is an international school. We have campuses on 4 continents. We have 60,000 alumni in 175 countries. Same thing, depending on what we teach, what we research, there are things we can push. Jasjit, you are the chaired professors, double-chaired professors on sustainable development, but you also started as a, if I say again, if I may, classic strategy professor. So what happened?
Hi, Katell. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So like many of us, I had midlife crisis and the usual questions about what next, right? So but obviously it was a good time for me in my career, once I was secure where I was, to say what next and what would challenge me. And outside there's a lot happening both on the environmental and the social side. And the good news was there seemed to be a lot of latent demand from students, and particularly exceptionally from alumni, that we as business schools really should move beyond perhaps being partly the part of the problem to squarely in a range where we are trying to be part of the solution and engaging with society more proactively rather than just relying completely on the market mechanism. So that's the context in which I think my career has evolved. And so over the past 10 years, my agenda really has been a little bit of a broker, which is I engage all the way from nonprofits to social enterprises to large companies, investors, philanthropists, and so on. We learn from one community, take the learnings to another community, and then we try also to be platforms where we bring these communities together, because I think no single community can really be making progress alone on that. We can't exclude business for sure, like Aarti and Daniel have emphasized, it's a very critical role. At the same time, business alone, let's face it, is not going to save the world. So I think,
and we're going to discuss more about that after, but I think that's an important takeaway already. So Jasjit and myself with others within INSEAD, we're also intrapreneurs, trying to change things at INSEAD so that we integrate more of that within business education. So I think we all can contribute from wherever you are. Jessie, we saw the results of the research, so I'd like to hear from you how they resonate with you. In particular, one of the key findings we heard was the very important need for C-suite level buy-in for things to really take on in a company in terms of intrapreneurship. Do you concur?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely concur, because so 4 years ago, when I first kind of began working on this impact entrepreneurship practice, so essentially setting up this and kind of running with a small group of colleagues, this impact entrepreneurship practice, which extends our services. Back then, we were a pretty small kind of ring-fenced team. So we had a small ring-fenced business unit. And actually over the last 4 years, kind of through that process, our global executive has changed significantly. So we actually had a new global chairman and CEO, Carmine DeCibio, step up about 2 years ago now, and he defined a totally new corporate strategy for EY to create long-term value for our clients, for people, for society, and for the planet, along with a totally new set of global firm-wide targets and indicators spanning financial value, client value, but also people value and social value. And he set out with our global executive and defined a firm-wide social value ambition to positively impact 1 billion lives by 2030, and established a new transformative social impact platform known as EY Ripples to achieve that. And that included the top-down governance mechanisms to ensure that all of our EY member firms around the world are collectively driving towards those social value metrics, not just our financial metrics, but also our people retention metrics, our client satisfaction metrics, and our social impact metrics. It involved upskilling and engagement programs to drive bottom-up demand from EY, from our people globally, as well as kind of consistent global technologies, toolkits, protocols to enable scale and strategic alignment. And so during that kind of process over 4 years, my team has gone from being a relatively small ring-fenced team working on our own with quite a lot of autonomy to, through that process, gaining a huge amount of C-suite buy-in by aligning directly with our corporate strategy. And now our impact entrepreneurship work is one of the key ways in which we are achieving that 1 billion lives ambition. And so my work has really gone from delivering consulting services directly to social entrepreneurs to overseeing and supporting all our EY member firms around the world to do that as a core part of our corporate strategy. And that could not have been achieved without significant C-suite buy-in. And that's enabled us to really leverage the scale of our organization and support social entrepreneurs across 150 countries with 300,000 people, which you mentioned at the top, Katell.
And so it's interesting also, you mentioned the role of KPIs. Any other incentive that was set together in the firm to try and help that scaling? Anything from a financial point of view? You were mentioning, small team when you started, I'm assuming limited budget. Now with this ambition, are we talking about, do we have a chief mission officer? Do we have KPIs? Do we have a whole budget for that to spread throughout the organization? What was key to the scaling?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that the kind of first thing that was key, so in addition to C-suite buy-in, and I guess almost as a precursor and an output of C-suite buy-in, was, as you say, the business case, right? The business case for actually why we should be extending our services to impact entrepreneurs, and more broadly, why we should be creating social impact. And one of the most important things in that journey was being able to articulate how the work that we do with social entrepreneurs does not just create social value. It also, and I think these are all the findings that are in the report, it also creates employee engagement. So we know from not just use cases, but also data, because now we have questions built around EY Ripples and our social impact work into our recruitment processes, into our talent development processes. We know that working with impact entrepreneurs is one of the most defining and exceptional career experiences at EY that our people have. So it creates that people value proposition, but also, as you say, Katell, it's also contributing to commercial value, perhaps not in a traditional way, because we don't try to make a profit off the social entrepreneurs that we serve, but what we do is see that the value that they bring around EY people and EY as an organization learning about innovation, about new business models that have the potential to disrupt entire industries, the brand value that we can build from that, and also the opportunities for us to partner with multinational corporations who are more traditional commercial clients, to partner around a shared agenda of social innovation is hugely valuable to us in the long term.
Yeah, thanks. And that's also how they managed to keep you. So that was a good thing. So Jasjit, here we have an example of what's happening in a company. I mean, what does a trend look like? You've written in your research about the warm glow of social initiative, but you're also questioning the complexity of delivering both financial value and impact. So what does research today tells us in terms of the possibility of reconciling these two objectives together?
So a couple of points on that, right? One, like Jessie pointed out, the trick for entrepreneurs is really to figure out, given the environment in which they're operating, opportunities where impact and business align, right? And then establishing how much can they align and how can you make them align. And very often it's about making the business case not just on financials, but on the intangibles, and perhaps translating that into a dollar value very often, like we did in some related research on retention benefits, but then you can put a dollar value on retention benefits. So even if Jessie said her part of the business is not as profitable, well, the trick then is to somehow convince others that once you put a dollar value on brand, on retention, and all of that, it does add up. The other thing, I mean, just staying a little bit with the business case, is that people also need to realize it's perhaps at least as much a change management issue as a business case issue, right? If there are smart, motivated people working on a problem, they would generally find solutions. I mean, that's what I believe. The trick is, how do you get those smart, motivated people and give them the opportunity? And if you are an entrepreneur, I think one of the biggest challenge for you is not the business case, I would argue, but making sure exactly why is everybody in it, and then making sure that they stay aligned with it, not just sort of in the beginning, but throughout the process. You know, somebody who's 2 years away from retirement might be in it to now get societal glory, or to be able to go home and tell their children, look, what I'm doing is not just making millions of dollars, I'm doing something worthwhile for the world, because that's what he's being or she's being challenged on at the dinner table every day. Somebody else might not be as hungry, a junior person, as hungry for the money, but they're saying, give me a challenge, give me a learning opportunity, as well as opportunity to make a difference. And they might be willing to take a financial compromise. So really identifying the trigger points for everyone. So it's the personal case as well as the business case. And then on the impact side, back to your question, not taking impact for granted. Because one of the things that very often happens is, you know, we can easily see the financial numbers. So we focus too much on that. And we just say, hey, we are operating at the base of the pyramid. So that's enough for us to have impact in the world. If you're just bringing diabetes to the base of the pyramid by selling them sugared drinks, you know, it's not impact, it's negative impact. And this goes back to challenging yourselves a little bit. This is something we've learned in the development sector, sometimes the hard way, that, you know, very often the impact that we assume doesn't happen. So it's a little bit of that. I think the corporate world also needs to become better at, are we really moving beyond just counting number of thousands of lives saved to actually making a meaningful impact in the lives of these people that we claim to be helping?
Yeah, thanks for this. And here, what I'm hearing also is the importance of, you know, the values and the metrics to make sure that things are properly accounted for. There is after many years of hype around win-win, right? Money and impact. The research community is questioning that today. Is that correct? I mean, it's not as is. I mean, basically, people are saying we need to make trade-offs. It's hard.
I would say, I think it's important to distinguish two things which very often get confused. One is are there win-win opportunities? For sure, there are a lot of win-win opportunities. But going from that to saying, will every single important problem in the world be solved by win-win solutions? The answer is a clear no, right? And very often the trick, especially from the entrepreneur's point of view then, is to how to take a big problem, break it up into chunks. Some of those chunks can be implemented as a win-win within the corporate framework, but then figuring out what collaborations are needed outside with development agencies, with governments, with social enterprises, with nonprofits, to say these missing pieces, I know I cannot make a business case out of that. But to really have the full impact that I want, these pieces need to be filled in. And I think that's where coordinating around common goals and outcomes, and then working towards that, I think that is the trick. So entrepreneurship is not just about making something happen with a company saving the world. It's about breaking the problem into pieces, some of which is a win-win piece, which you can scale up within the company, and some of which is a complementary piece for which you need to go, raise money or get resources from the social sector, from the government, foundations, and so on. And I think that humility, that we won't fix everything, but we have to see what is our relative competitive advantage and where do we need others to come in. I think that's where the current conversation is, as I see.
Thanks, Jasjit. Jessie, back to you to ask also, what are the challenges that you face. One of the major findings of the research that was just presented is that basically to scale as an entrepreneur in a large organization, the barriers seems to often be more coming internally than externally. What stand in the way for you and still as today to try and scale your impact and the impact of your team within a large company like EY?
Yeah, and I would really echo that in terms of the challenges being internal. I think that's one of the trade-offs of scaling across an organization and moving away from having a ring-fence budget where you have autonomy. And we have been able to scale by really looking to embed across our organization and align with our corporate strategy. Just as some examples, over the last few years since we launched this approach, we've been able to scale from delivering about 50 full-time consulting projects a year with social entrepreneurs to having delivered 600 full-time consulting projects with social entrepreneurs. We've delivered 100 business clinics and coaching programs with groups of social entrepreneurs. We've supported thousands of social entrepreneurs through kind of digital tools and solutions. But that is a real challenge, primarily for a few reasons. I think there are real issues of trade-offs. I would just echo, Jasjit's point around the trade-offs, and just to give some examples of that. Because we are not a distinct business unit, we are not a foundation, working with social entrepreneurs is our business. It means that the same EY people that are delivering for-profit commercial consulting projects They are the same EY people that are also needing to deliver subsidized or for impact projects with social entrepreneurs. And that trade-off is really challenging to manage. And to Jasjit's point, we've had to put in place incentives to really ensure that the social value contribution of those projects is at least considered in a holistic balanced scorecard alongside the financial value that is contributed by kind of more profitable commercial projects.
So sorry, you mean that for staff, basically when they contribute to a low bono action for social entrepreneurs within AY, that also is part of their KPA and the evaluation and what is taken into account for promotion, is that correct?
Exactly. And that's at the individual level. So we've had to embed into our talent practice so that at an individual level, individuals are actively recognized and get promotion benefits from doing this work. At the business unit level, we've also had to do that such that the managing partners that lead those business units are also recognized. And that comes both with a kind of bottom-up engagement approach through a significant kind of communications and upskilling programs, but also top-down, where our global executive have committed to this ambition to positively impact 1 billion lives by 2030 and actively push down hard targets. So and so every region, every business unit has those hard targets. The challenge, to Jasjit's point, is where it meets in the middle, and you have some really tangible trade-offs around, how do I do both? Which is more important?
Yeah, and that sounds like a lot of bureaucracy added for that purpose as well. And maybe, anyway, I won't get there, but maybe making the job different from what you were originally doing, right? Jasjit, so you've been teaching this, and you still are teaching this at INSEAD. I mean, you run our course on impact investing, strategy for impact, and our program on social entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. So you've done that for a few years. What do you see these graduates they want to work in this space? We have a lot of graduates who come to INSEAD who already work in companies, and they very often go back to these companies after coming through our university. So what do they struggle the most with?
I would say, I don't know if struggle is the question, but one of the most common questions people have, how do I get into this space, right? This question. And there is this tendency, and to be honest, I had a little bit of that 10 years ago when I was trying to break in as well, which is sometimes there's this tendency to say we need to start from scratch and give up what I already have, and now I'm going to be this completely new person. And the reality is, even in this so-called, let's say, social impact space, or as an entrepreneur, you still need the accounting, you still need the marketing, you still need the logistics. So the question also is to ask, what are you good at, right? And to me, the thing that I always emphasize is, okay, so you don't want to get too carried away just with your passion, right? I think a passion is a great thing, but it's not the only thing. Right? Not the only thing, because you'll end up sort of burning yourself and sometimes not achieving anything. And so the right balance is, I like to draw these 3 circles about what is the social need? Is this really a social need? Second, yes, is it aligned with your passion? Because if you don't have the passion, you won't survive in there. But the third, what is your personal competitive advantage? If you're good at accounting, please help the world make progress on accounting for social impact, accounting for environmental impact. I mean, I can't imagine a bigger impact that you can have as an accountant today than if you were helping make progress on accounting for ESG. You don't need to go start, painting houses of poor people in rural Cambodia over a weekend and feel good about yourself. You have to say, what are you good at? What are the big needs of society? And what do I feel strongly about that I can contribute? And I think that's where a lot of the power is. And you do need the resilience, because there aren't ready-made, hey, you come to recruiting office at INSEAD and apply to these 20,000 social impact jobs. So it does take a little bit of hanging in there, but generally people do figure out once they have the passion. And I think that's where the passion is important as well.
Thank you so much, and I think it's important to recall, because we brought that conversation also in one of your class, Jasjit, at INSEAD, the fact that if you only go with passion as an entrepreneur, the risk of burnout is very high. It's a conversation we don't have enough, and it's been, there are books about this. Right. That's something just we want to raise. And then the fact that staying where you are can really help you deliver that change is what Jessie is really telling us she's done. Maybe if she had been coming from outside, the impact wouldn't have been the same also in terms of her personal contribution. Danielle, over to you, because I think we're entering the networking phase before we take a few questions. Fantastic to see the profiles also in the chat. I'm just going to pick a couple of questions, if that's okay, as we are starting to go towards the wrap up. I think, Jessie, there's one for you of I think it's Rushi asking about the role of the brand. I mean, did the brand of EY, I mean, was that problematic? Is that problematic to you when you go and try to conduct the project that you will conduct? Does it stand in the way? Is it hard for you to explain what you're doing? How do you handle that part?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I was just discussing, I was actually in Ruchi's breakout group. Okay. So we were just discussing this, but I have to say, I'll just kind of summarize what I shared in that group, which was that to me overall, the EY brand has been a huge benefit, primarily because it gets me personally gets a foot in the door into conversations that I would never be able to do if I was an entrepreneur in my own right. The trust, the reach, the visibility that EY has is huge. However, I think there is a specific challenge in ensuring that we can articulate to small and growing socially impactful social enterprises that the expertise that EY brings to help large multinationals and large government departments to address their, be it finance, IT, strategy, consulting, whatever it is, that actually we can tailor that and make it really relevant for them. That is a challenge and something that we've had to work on. And we typically use a lot of case studies, a lot of testimonials from social enterprises to achieve that. But overall, I'd say a huge benefit. The EY brand has been a huge benefit in general.
And just quickly, because I mean, ultimately, in terms of really ripple effect and scaling, what we would want is that the traditional EY service provided to the firm integrates impact, right? So, and not just focused on social entrepreneurship. Do you see this happening as well in your company as a shift?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a slow process, right? But I think we're on that journey, and that's what really drives me is that, I have to call out, I think, one piece of research or one article that I remember Jasjit sharing in the INSEAD Social Entrepreneurship Program course was, what's your end game? I think it's a Stanford Social Innovation Review. And I've thought about that a lot. It's really probably one of the articles that has guided me to think about, actually, was my intent for this impact entrepreneurship practice, did we want to spin it off so that it was its own business unit? Should it spin out of the organization? But for me, I've taken a view for a long time that what I want to do, and I think we have different views on this as a team, but my view is that I want to work myself out of a job, because I think it should just be part and parcel of how EY does business, that we just serve impact entrepreneurs in every single part of our business as just a different type of client. And we're on that journey. I think the metrics that we have, that top-down pressure and that bottom-up engagement is there, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, working ourselves out of a job, I think, is the objective of all of us here in that call. Jasjit, there were a lot of questions on the metrics. Here, I wonder. I mean, we could make a whole webinar out of it. But could you share maybe your views on that? What are the KPIs we're missing? What's most important here on the metrics front to take away? You muted, Jasjit. Yeah.
So one of the things is sometimes conversations about metrics are very impatient to come up with that 1 or 2 or 3 numbers which will solve all of the world's problem. And I think the problems are complex and multidimensional. So that's the first thing, which is we have to really, if we are solving problems, we have to go down to the problem number. And I think there's a distinction between the ESG kind of metrics, which are more about how do we prevent harm. How do we make sure our supply chains are free of trafficking? How are we making sure that we are not causing too much environmental damage and all of that? versus are we having genuine positive impact in terms of value creation for society, especially on issues of inclusion, poverty, inequality, things like that, right? And which is why we need these different kind of segments. So the mainstream conversations of sustainability or sustainable investing are very often still focused on ESG. And those are a different category of metrics from the conversations around impact investing, impact business, social enterprise. They are about saying, let's move beyond not causing harm to actually doing good and making progress, for example, towards sustainable development goals, but then actually not talking at this general level, oh, look, I'm better than you because I cover 9 of the SDGs and you cover only 7. I think those conversations are ridiculous, but unfortunately are still happening. But you really have to come down to who are you helping and how and what problem are you solving? And in this context, I would strongly encourage people to look up the work of Impact Management Project. If you just Google it, you'll find a lot of fantastic material in terms of making positive difference to the world. And that's a different conversation from the simple ESG metrics. And I think the role of the regulator and government, it's very important to emphasize that as measurement practices improve and as regulations tighten, actually it helps the entrepreneur because it helps the entrepreneur make the business case. The entrepreneur can now say, if we don't clean it up now, in 3 years, the regulation is coming. The writing is on the wall. If we start fixing now, we'll be ahead of our competitors and we can turn this into a competitive advantage. If we are doing nothing for 3 years until the day of the regulation, we'll actually be behind. And so I think, and that's why things like regulations, civil society, academia, and entrepreneurs, these are complements, and we really have to carefully think of one another as partners rather than being in our own little silo fighting our little battle. I think the war is much bigger than the battle. So.
Can I just build on that, Katell, just quickly, just to build on Jasjit's point, because I totally agree. And I think for me, another piece which is really important around KPIs metrics is that actually when you're, as a corporation, when you're looking across your balanced scorecard and performance, that you don't look at impact or environmental metrics distinctly and look at ESG distinctly from your business, that actually you are measuring it as part of holistic business performance, and you are measuring it as robustly and alongside your financial metrics and your people metrics. And I think there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of academic progress that needs to be made, but I think that holistic view is critical and a huge enabler in and of its own right.
Yeah, and none of this should be a sideshow. It should really be integrated, I think is the key. So we have to wrap up. For each one of you now, something to take away. I'm an employee in a large corporation, or maybe not large, even middle size. I want to start my own initiative inside to move things. What's your key recommendation? Jessie, I start with you. Where do I start?
I'm going to say 2 things. I think one is think about the stage of your initiative. I think if you're starting up something relatively early, I would strongly advise to think about keeping a ring-fence budget, keeping it quite tight so that you can have the autonomy to test and innovate. Then if you want to scale, I think it's absolutely critical to get C-suite buy-in to really think about how you align everything to corporate strategy and how you can really leverage the true scale of your organization. And the second piece of advice would be think about what's your end game.
Yeah, start small, incubate, ring-fenced, end game. Jasjit, what would you tell me?
I would say one of the things is there's a tendency again to say, I need to do something huge, which is visible, and I want to feel good about it. Yeah. I think a lot of people are already in jobs where they have amazing influence, and then they get tired of that and they want to give all of that up and say, I want to start my social impact initiatives. To me, the first question is, why do you even want to start social impact initiative? Are you sure you can't have a greater impact in your current job? I remember the case of INSEAD alum who came up to me after one of my talks, and she said, wow, I just realized that I'm managing a fund of $2 billion. And I was thinking about coming up with my impact initiative. And your talk made me realize, of course, I'd love to take credit for that, that I'd better just start thinking, where is that 2 billion doing? And, there's no way I can do any more impact than making sure that 2 billion is being spent with an eye towards slightly better ESG performance. That's one. The second, I would say very critically, and this links a little bit to the burnout thing, but also the why, which is take good care of yourself. I think people get into this, oh, I've been doing so much for myself, so now I'll do something for the world, and they're doing something for the world but it starts with yourself, and it's different things for different people. I mean, for me, I meditate 20 minutes every day, and that keeps my energy up, just being a little bit mindful, and I feel I have something to give to the world when I have something. When I don't have anything, I have nothing to give to the world. I'll try to feel good about myself, and 3 months I'll have burnout and I'll be lying on my bed, which happens all the time, by the way, to entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. So
thanks, Jasjit. And a great point to wrap up. Take care of yourself. You can read Gib Bullock's book on that. I think it's a great lessons learned if you're interested. And Dan, with this, thank you so much, Jessie and Jasjit, for coming together with us. And Daniel, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I was just posting a couple of the links as you were discussing that. Super insightful. Thank you so much for your contributions. There was so much to unpack even further in future conversations. Brings me also to the announcement that we're going to have another conversation on April 20th, where we're also going to be announcing the first cohort of the Unusual Pioneers. So you're going to see yet another batch of really inspiring examples of social entrepreneurs, but you're also going to hear more from Novartis and their journey towards social entrepreneurship. With that, again, a big thank you to the panelists. If you want to learn more about our research, I think Artie has posted the email. Contact us as research@yunussb.com, and we will be releasing the newest research in a couple of weeks and months. But also, if you want to implement experiments that help you as an entrepreneur to connect your initiative to business metrics, do reach out. We still have this year to offer experiments for free. And if you have any other questions, please also do connect with us on the various social media channels. Again, big thank you, big round of applause to all of you for sticking with us in a highly interactive conversation. Hope to see you again on April 20th. Thanks so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane these days. We'll get out of this. Thank you. Goodbye.